Hey, this is James in the Giant Economy. Thanks for joining us today. So today, me and the boys, the Lime and the Ridgeback, we're gonna do a little economic update, right? And now typically this is gonna go out to a lot of my partners and friends and business associates, but I'm gonna put it out there for everybody because I want to make sure everybody is prepared. So in the last 3 years, it's kind of been a battle of the bulls versus the bears, right? People think that things only go up, or that the stock market, real estate, everything is headed in an upward direction. Those are the bulls. The bears think it's going to go down. We're going to have a recession. We're going to have a pullback, something of that nature, right? In the last 3 years, especially the last 12 to 24 months, it's been a real battle, right? And it's been kind of up and down as well. And so we're going to talk about that. But the most important thing is this: is what will the future bring and how to prepare for it, right? So I'm going to diagnose kind of the bull side and the bear side, and I'm going to tell you what I think and the ways you should prepare, and I'm going to encourage you to make a decision, right? So let's get into it. So the two camps, you have hyperinflation and you have deflation or recession, right? Again, deflation is a code word for recession. Technically, it means to deflate, as in like, hey, it doesn't go up as fast, but we all know it just kind of just crashes down, right? So it could be recession. Some people are saying depression, right? I don't know if that's going to happen because we're off the gold standard and they can just hit the money printer, right? But I have on my notes inflation or deflation, ... or both, which we're going to get to in the end. All right, so inflation. What's the bull? What's the bull argument, right? And again, these are just some of my notes type thing. There are actually tons of things that are like working in the background and stuff. And you just gotta pull them together and see what happens, right? Or see what direction it gives. That's the real key. But I'm gonna go over some of them with you. And if I miss any, if you have any to add, go ahead and put definitely put a like on the video. But mention in the comments. You know what I'm saying? I'm not perfect. I'm gonna miss things, but I'm gonna give you a good broad brushstroke picture, right? So people on the inflation camp, whether it's just high inflation or hyperinflation, the things that the bull side that people always go up, is number one, overprinting, right? We have more money in the money supply than we've ever had in our lifetimes, right? 25% of the total dollars in the world were printed in 2020, right? They're still circulating. They haven't been taken out of circulation. Okay, so as people spend more, prices are going to go up, right? In other words, we have more money chasing less stuffs. Okay, and so that's going to create some inflation. Now, the question is it going to keep going up, or what? Are they going to keep printing more money? Because they have. But it's not direct to us consumers like we did during the PPP or unemployment or things like that. The biggest cause of inflation is actually government spending. Stuff that the government just blows billions of dollars on. They put out into the market, they print it, they put it into the market. That's what causes the most inflation actually, right? So number one is overprinting of the money supply, right? Or devaluing of the dollar, same thing, right? The value of the dollar is going lower, and so everything else is going higher. Supply chains are choked. They're still a bit choked, right? They've come a long way. They've gotten through, but you see things like housing is being choked in a different way. One of the guys I follow, so One Rents a Lot of Times, is actually pretty good. I agree. I love listening to him, but I don't agree with him fully. I think he's got a really good 6 to 12 month mindset, but I don't think he's looking 24 to 36 months out, right? I don't know if he's looking, I would say 12 to 36 months out, right? 1 to 3 years. I think he's called some great things, and one of the things I love about him is he's open about when he's right and when he's wrong, right? And that's really what you want from somebody. You don't want somebody who's trying to skirt under the rug and just tell them all the bright things about you. This isn't a first date type thing, right? So one of the things he talks about, he says the housing market is broken, right? People have, I think the average mortgage out there is 3.6%, okay? And I think it's 60% of mortgages are under 4% total or something of that nature. And you put that together with there's only 30% of houses don't have a mortgage or something like that, right? You throw those statistics together and you say, okay, if someone's in a house right now and they bought it in 2020, they paid a high price for it, but their payment is really low, right? If they sell that house and they go to somebody else, or they try to go buy a house, they're going to be paying almost twice as much they're not going to, and they can't afford it, right? Number two, so they're just going to be house stuck for until they can get unstuck, okay? That gridlocks the market because people aren't buying and selling, right? What that does, it impacts supply, okay? It lowers supply, and you have this gridlock, right? You put that also with the raising of rates, and you have a gridlock of demand, because all of a sudden, if you're a lender, I've talked to lenders about this, and they'll tell you, hey, before the Fed started to raise rates, we had 30 people a month getting approved. Right now we're getting 5 because they can't get approved for the higher rates. Okay, so they're out of the housing market. So it's this tension, right? And we see that where the housing is almost kind of flattening out, right? It's going to come bumpy, but it's flattening out for the most part in the housing sector. But the point is this, is that supply chains are still being affected. They're just being affected in a different way now. Okay, like I talked in the housing market. So we have that kind of gridlock that's going to keep us steady, or maybe going up depending on which things go. Other thing is government is overdebted. Like we have not been this far in debt ever in the U.S.'s history. We are, I forget the ticker, it's like a few trillion now, right? And it goes up by the minute. Our national debt is at all-time highs. How are we gonna solve this, right? There's 2 ways that we can do it. One, we can pay it back the old-fashioned way, willingly or unwillingly, right? Like in Greece, they had like forced repayments for their debts. Or we can hyperinflate it and we can print a bunch of money to pay it off, just like Germany did after World War I, right? The Weimar Germany thing. They're thinking that, hey, the government's going to take the easy road out because they want to be reelected, and they're just going to print, which I understand that. I see the validity of that, if it makes sense. Also, inflation's clear. Like, if anyone tells you there's no inflation right now, they're lying, or they're dumb, or they're just keeping their eyes closed, or they have something to sell you or something like that, right? You just take a look at shadow stats, and typically if the government says it's, hey, the inflation's at 8%, it's typically at double that, at like 16 to 18%, right? So it's clear that we're already facing inflation. The question that they have, is it going to keep going up, and what is the rate and how fast, right? Are we going to hit hyperinflation, or are we just going to stay at this, like, hey, it's going to be like 8 or 9% a year cumulative, right? So if a house costs $100,000 now, you add 10% to it per year, in 2 years it's going to cost $122,000, right? So that's on the bear side. Okay, let's talk about, that's on the bull side, excuse me. Let's talk about the bear side. Okay, let's talk about the people that are thinking deflation and such. We talked about record government that is in debt, right? Well, the average American is in a record credit card debt. It hit, I think, 1.3 billion or something like that this year. And so Americans' household debt for their credit cards, again, this is not for assets or anything like that, this is purely on credit cards, is facing all-time highs. That's not good. Student loans payback. Let me say this. There's no more free money. Okay. How does that affect things? Well, 2020, 2021, again, the government just showered us with money. God, I hope you got some. I think everybody did. Everybody got free stuff one way or the other, right? Well, this puts more in circulation. I have more to spend, so I'm going to spend more, right? And so this creates more inflation, right? Well, that's done with all the extras that came into it, like being able to put your house forbearance, all that good stuff. That's coming to an end. And student loan payments are coming due, right? This month in September 2023, they have already collected $1 billion in student loan payments from a source I read. I'm not saying it's going to be $1 billion per month, that's what's going to be taken out of circulation, but it's important to know if it's around $1 billion a month or something like that, or maybe half that, or whatever it is, whatever the number is. The important thing is this: when you're paying your student loan, that means you're not buying ice cream with it. You're not buying food. You're not buying a trip to Cancun or something like that, right? In other words, your money is being put somewhere else, so you can't spend it on something else. It takes money out of the economy in a sense, right? It's going to the lenders, which who knows what they'll spend it on, right? But it's taking money out of, not necessarily out of circulation, but out of the out of everything else, right? And so that's going to affect everything else that we see. It's also going to affect the qualifying of loans, right? Because if you didn't have student debt in the last 2 years, and you said, hey, you don't have that $400 payment or $1,000 payment or whatever it is, right? Well, you can afford, $2,000 a month in a mortgage, or $2,500 or $3,000, whatever. Cool, buy the house now. All of a sudden, when it starts coming in due, you don't qualify for it anymore, so you don't get the house. This is how things can affect and things can get, how the bears build their case, right? Also, I've heard that 40% of the consumers in the U.S. have student loan debt. Of that 40%, they are the ones that spend 60% of the economy. So in other words, if you're retired, you're not in that camp, right? But if you're retired, you're not spending a lot of money either. So the 60% of the wages, 60% of the money spent in America is from 40% of the population. That's going to have to pay back student loan debt. That's going to affect things. That's going to be a big pop. All right. Unemployment, right? So in the inflation camp, I missed out on this one, but they say, hey, unemployment's all-time lows. People are working because they need to pay stuff. In the deflation camp, where it's like, hey, how do they count unemployment? Well, they count it like saying, hey, they kind of double dip. So if they say, hey, you drive for Uber and Lyft, which pretty much everyone does that's in that industry, right? We're counting you as double employed. You have 2 jobs. Cool. So if you if you have 3 waiting tables jobs, and so your combined total is like 45 hours a week or something like that, they're counting you with 3 jobs, even though you're only working pretty much the average of 1 job, right? The amount of hours, right? But you're triple employed type thing. So they count just full time. So the numbers on the unemployment are a little icky, right? And I'm going to add this, is that everybody I've talked to, like not everybody, like 9/10 of the people I've talked to out there have a second job, or the new code word for a second job, which is side gig, right? Hey, what's your side gig? Oh, your side thing, right? Moonlighting is what they used to call it back in the day, because you did it at night under the moonlight, right? You had your day job, and you were moonlighted as like a DJ or something, right? I don't know if you guys have ever worked a second job, like really worked a second job, full-time a second job. I did when I first started building my own business, just to make sure bills are paid and try and get some health insurance. But I'll tell you this, you can do it for a time, but there will be a time where you just burn out, where you just throw the towel in. You're like, the wheels on the bus don't go round and round anymore, okay? Something breaks. So part-time jobs are good for a short time, right? They're doable for however long you can do them. Everyone's different, but my point is they are meant to be temporary. They're not meant to be permanent. And now there's a lot of Americans that are working second jobs that are having to do so because that is the only way to support themselves. That's scary. What if something breaks and all their expenses hit the fan or something like that, right? What if they get into a car accident and can't go to either job? What if one job lays them off? What if something happens and all of a sudden they're behind on the bills, things start to get repossessed, and it just goes downhill from there. You take that, you extrapolate it on all 300 million Americans, and let's say it's 10% of the population that happens to. All of a sudden, houses, cars, guns, all this stuff starts getting sold cheap or repossessed, and because someone needs money, right? All right, moving on. Let's see here. Can't read my own helmet. Okay. The rising value of the dollar. Now, this is kind of the opposite side of the inflation camp, right? Because there's like, hey, the dollar is worthless, right? Because we're printing so much. And there's truth to that. But also, if you look at the DXY, which is the measurement of the value of dollars in relation to other currencies, right? So the dollar versus the euro, the dollar versus the Chinese yuan, the dollar versus the Australian dollar, stuff like that, right? It'll show how strong it is. So if the dollar goes down in value, right, and on the DXY, that means it takes more dollars to buy Mexican pesos. In other words, instead of exchange rate of $1 to 6.5 Mexican pesos or 7 Mexican pesos, It's $1 equals 5 Mexican pesos now, right? Things in Mexico get more expensive, not cheaper. On the other side of it, if the dollar goes up, which on the DXY, it is starting to go up again, things in other countries get cheaper because $1 instead of 7 pesos now equals 8 or maybe 10, right? So all of a sudden that vacation that you just had cost you 20% less, or you just spent the same amount and got 20% more out of it, right? Either way. Right now the dollar is rising. It is starting to go up, and it doesn't fly up like fast. It's very slow moving because there's trillions of dollars in circulation, right? But it's starting to go up, and what that signals is when the value of the dollar goes up, it puts pressure on everything else, right? So in other words, if it's all about value, right? If the value of a dollar is here and the value of the house is here, right? That means housing prices are going to go up, right? Or if they're equal. If the value of the dollar goes down, that means housing prices are now worth more dollars, right? Because the value of the dollar goes down. Now the opposite, if the value of the dollar goes up, that means houses are worth less because the value of something is fluctuates, right? But you always trade one for the other, right? And typically we always go to dollars or something else, but if the value of the dollar goes up, that means everything else costs less because the dollar is more valuable than it once was. A little confusing, but I hope you get it, right? If in other words, if $1 equals one house, right, or one stuff, we'll just say stuffs, right? $1 equals one stuff. If the value of the dollar goes up to 1.2, that means it buys more stuffs, right? Because the value of the stuffs is the same, but the value of the dollar went up. Same thing, if the value of the dollar goes down to 0.8, well, the value of stuffs goes up. Instead of having $10 to buy now, it costs 12 or something like that. Hopefully I did my math right. Anyway, you get my point, right? The value of the dollar is going up, and that's going to put domestically pressure on everything, on the value of everything else that we exchange dollars for, which is everything, right? Alternatively, it's going to put pressure on American companies who are selling things abroad the world, right? I don't know about you, but I'm recording this not on an iPhone. I know I'm not part of the cult. Hate me if you want to. Love me if you can. Anyway, I'm actually doing it on a Samsung, right? But both of them are around the world. Doesn't matter. They're both American companies. Well, let's take the iPhone example, right? iPhone right now, the brand new, I think it's $900 or something like that. I don't know, I don't buy it, but let's just say it's $900 US, right? And you take that to China, you can actually sell it for like 3,500 yuan, Chinese yuan, right? Which is actually, it's worth a lot up there because they can't get them in, right? If the value of the dollar goes up and the value of the Chinese yuan stays the same, right? That means American products are worth more overseas if they're going to pay $900 for it, right? So $900 now equals 5,000 Chinese yuan. We aren't directly affected by it. We don't really care much, right? Who cares about the cost of tea in China, right? You care about it if you're an American trying to sell tea to China, American tea to China, okay? Because now the Chinese person, they have to pay 1.5 times the amount of money they normally would have to buy an iPhone, right? They're not working, they're not getting extra pay at work, they're not getting extra anything, it just costs more. That's something to consider about American companies, the dollars they make. So when the dollar flies up and Apple and Google and Tesla and all these other companies that are worldwide companies selling American products, accepting dollars, not Chinese yuan or anything like that, it's going to affect their profit margins because people aren't going to buy as much, or they're going to look to a competitor to buy something else, right? So it's going to affect the profit margins of American companies. When the profit margins go down in American companies, what happens, right? They got to find it somewhere, or they got to start laying people off, or typically what happens, their stock gets sold first because they have a bad earnings record, right? Stock goes down. And if they can't pull it up, then they have to start making more money somehow. And if you've already done all your marketing and you can only make this much money, how do you make more money, right? You lower your expenses. What's expensive? People and locations. So you start to cut those, right? And then unemployment goes up. Okay, so bond yields are great right now, right? Again, this is the bear camp. Bond yields are great. So what does that mean? So the U.S. government will give you, if they say, hey, if you give us money, we'll give you more back over a span of time, right? Whatever that agreement is, okay? Now, if it's, it could be a 6-month bond, could be a year bond, could be 1 month bond, but they're saying, hey, right now we'll give you an interest rate, right? America will pay you for your money, a really low interest rate. Typically, it's been around 1% or so for the most of the decade. Right now, it's at 5. I can go to the bank and get 5.5% for like, I think a 6-month bond or maybe a 12-month bond or something like that. I think it's 5% for a 1-month bond, and you just keep rolling it in. So I can make 5% a year by keep rolling in 1 month at a time or something like that if it doesn't change. And that is as secure as you can get. It's actually the only thing the government allows you to say, hey, this is safe, okay? Because the U.S. government is going to pay it back. One way or the other, they're either going to print it or just pay it back, right? If the U.S. government goes under, we have bigger problems, okay? So they're a very safe asset, as they say. You can get 5% right now. That means if you have $5 million in the bank, right? You know how that's what, it's two, is that, man, I can do math really quick. 5%, that's, what, 20, man, it's late, I'm not doing the math, but that's like 250,000 a year or something like that. If you do 5 million, like if you're retired and you have $5 million to your name, you can just make 250 a year in treasury bonds. If I'm doing math right? Why not? Why not, right? Because it's safe. And if you're retired, you're like, hey, that's what I want, safety, right? I don't need to take risks anymore. So what does that mean? That means if bonds are attracting money, it has to come from somewhere. Stocks, real estate, crypto, you name it, it's going to start migrating. It already has started to migrate over to bonds, okay? And when if the poop hits the fan really hard, it's going to migrate a lot faster, which means these things cascade downward. And therefore the deflation camp that's what the deflation camp wants. And the biggest thing I'm going to talk about, just briefly, and this goes with bonds, is the inverted yield curve. Now, the inverted yield curve has been accurate for the last, I think, 50 to 70 years on calling recessions, except for once. I think there was one time where it didn't, and it just smoothed out, right? Now, whatever you think, this could be maybe, the second time in a half a century or longer, that the bond market, the bond market, the yield curve was wrong, right? Or, like Warren Buffett says, we could just trust in the yield curve, right? Buffett indicator is a big thing about yield curves, right? So what is an inverted yield curve? Whenever you loan someone money, right, there are lending terms, right? And the big three are how much, what the interest rate is, and how fast, right? Those are the big three. In other words, how much money are you lending them? What is the interest rate that you're going to receive on that money? And then how long before they have to pay all the money back, right? So what the inverted yield curve is typically the farther out the money is due, the more money you make, right? The sooner you get your money back, the less money you make typically, right? So if you're going to lend someone out money for 30 years, you're going to say, hey, my interest rate is a lot higher, right? Or higher, I should say. If you're going to lend it out for 10 years, it's going to be lower. If you're going to lend it out for 6 months, it's going to be even lower because you're like, hey, I'm getting my money back or collateral in 6 months guaranteed, right? It's not as risky as 30 years. Who knows what's going to happen in 30 years, right? You see this when you go to a home mortgage, right? You look at the interest rates. The 30-year is typically about, at least years ago, I don't know what it is now, it's about 3/4 of a point or 1%, to 1 point or 1% higher than the 15-year loan, right? 15-year loans, they're going to be a lot less interest rate rise, but the payment's going to be higher because it's compressed in 15 years. And so a lot of people pick 30 years because even though they're paying a higher interest rate, the monthly income is lower, okay? So what does this mean? Or what is it inverted? So what happens, what's inverted is typically the longer side of the yield curve is the one that where you're making a higher interest rate, right? And the sooner is the one that you're making less interest rate. An inverted yield curve means they switch. In other words, people are willing to pay 5% for a year, and they're only willing to or lenders are willing to give 5% money away, 5% for 1 year, and if you're promising 30 years, it's only like at 2%, right? It's inverted. It's not supposed to be the way. It's supposed to be, hey, 5% for 30 years, 2% for a year, right? What does this mean? Well, there's a few things to extrapolate, but the biggest thing is this: is right now people need money. That's why they're willing to give a higher interest rate for a shorter time. It's harder to get 30 years of interest, or someone to agree to a 30 years of borrowing, right? It's easier to get them to agree to 6 to 12 months, right? So if I'm saying, hey, I need money right now, I'll give you a huge freaking rate, 5%, 2%, whatever you want, name a rate. I just need money right now. But if we do 30 years, oh yeah, I'm not giving you much at all. That changes the way business is. In other words, it screams, I need money right now to do something or cover something, right? And when you have that coming from, if you're in real estate, you're like, hey, we do hard money loans all the time. Yeah, exactly, because you need money right now to close that, right? But if you're a big bank or an institution like the federal government, and you're not supposed to be in hard times or need money, right? It starts to signal things that something is not right in the economy. People are having need more money right now, sooner, and are willing to pay a higher price than to be patient. That means people need money. That means things aren't going well if they need money right now. They're desperate for money, right? So the yield curve inverts, and it is a signal that things aren't good in the economy. And pretty soon the economy will break and go into a recession. So those are the two sides. There's a lot of facts there for you, right? But the big thing is this. Number one, I want you to make a decision, right? Are we going to be in high inflation or hyperinflation? Or do you believe that we're headed for a recession, okay? And possibly, I hate to say depression, but there's a lot of people that are saying that. But one way or the other, make a decision, okay? Now, if you are in the inflation camp, right, what do you need to do? You need to buy everything. You need every dollar that you get in, you need to push back out into assets, okay? Something that's going to produce cash for you on a monthly rate, or something that will appreciate with time. So gold is a great example. Gold will not give you a monthly income, all right? It just sits there and it's a precious metal. It doesn't do squat, okay? But look pretty. It does look pretty. Things like oil investments, real estate, certain stocks, stuff like that. Bonds even are technically assets, right? They give you a return. If you are in the inflation camp, again, none of this is financial advice. I'm just sticking you to your own guns. Don't do anything I say. I'm just a guy with blue hair who's, semi-retired type thing and looking to really dominate this world and make an impact on it. But if you are in the inflation camp, you need to push every penny out because things are just going to get more expensive. That's what you're saying, I believe. Things will just keep getting more expensive here. There's not going to be any downwards pop. There's just going to be go straight up, okay? If you're in the deflation camp, what you need to do is you need to do two things. One, if you've got assets, you're going to need to do some math. How much are those assets costing you? Hey, if the bottom falls out, in other words, if the renter doesn't pay the rent for 4 months and you have to go put 20,000 repairs in it because they messed up the carpet, the walls, you got to do a refrigerator, washers, dryers, all that stuff, all the appliances because they're roach infested, been there, you're going to have $15,000, $20,000 to do it, right? So you need to do some math and put that in your calendar spreadsheet times how many houses you got and hold that in reserves. And then you're going to need 6 months of reserves for your business and then about 12 months more for reserves for your personal, right? You're going to have to start stacking away a lot of cash, okay? And you may even want to sell a few assets because you're in the mindset of, hey, I can sell this for $200,000 a day and tomorrow or 12 months, it'll be worth 150, right? Or 100. And I can buy it back for 25 to 50% off. Right, that's what I did with a lot of my real estate. I sold it, and I'm just waiting. So hold cash, do an inventory on your assets, right? Check out your assets. Anyway, do an inventory on your assets. Do some math to prepare for the worst, right? And definitely have some cash on hand, because if we do have a recession, right? If prices go down, that means there's gonna be, as Warren Buffett says, blood in the streets, okay? And people are gonna want to sell, and you're gonna get the best deals of your life, okay? The hard part is waiting for that and knowing out and how to timing it. It's never really easy, okay? So if you are in the deflation, that's what you do. If you're in the inflation camp, you need to buy. My personal thoughts are, is that I think that eventually, again, remember earlier I said you're in the inflation camp or the deflation camp, or both, right? I think we're gonna hit both. The question is the timing and the depth and the length of each, okay? And those are hard questions. Those are questions that we answer on the other side of the, bottom line. But I think right now we've hit a huge inflation bubble, and it's going to pop here pretty soon. Things to watch out for are unemployment. When that starts to go up, everything else is going to crumble. Everything else is going to crumble. And right now the Fed is the government's trying to hold it together, and they can for a time. When it's going to pop, I don't know. I do know this is that, and this is my prediction, right? It's either going to happen this fall, maybe October-ish time, or it's going to happen sometime in 2024. Why do I say that? Typically, economic crashes, for some reason, they happen in the fall. I don't know why, but maybe it's, this is my theory on why, is that they get the numbers from the summer, and a lot of businesses are very summer orientated. In other words, they're going to make 50 to 80% of their money in the summer, right? Two of my businesses have that, both insurance and real estate. You make a ton of money in the summer, right? In those 3 to 4 months, that really you can live off that for the rest of the year, okay? My theory, and then why recessions happen in the fall, are twofold. One, they see all the numbers from Q2 coming in from the summer, like Q2, Q3 coming in from the summer. They're like, ooh, this is not good, right? And they have to reveal those in America, right? It's public knowledge for companies, and then things just start cascading and going down. Also, the powers that be that kind of they don't want to have a recession right before Christmas, you don't want the news to say, hey, recession hits December 20th. You don't really want to do that, right? Or right before Thanksgiving. So I think that's why it happens. Now, that's all my guess. I'm not really completely sure, but I think that's why it happens. So I think it's going to happen either this fall or 2024. I am more leaning towards 2024 at the moment, because I think this recession is just going to take a long time to play out, to go down, right? There's a lot of money in the system. We're just now seeing these things hit. Oh, I didn't even get into the interest rates are at an all-time high. The Fed has raised them fastest in history, right? But there's a lag effect that they talk about. In other words, they raise interest rates a quarter of a point now. It takes like a full year or 6 months to a year for the economy to actually feel it, okay? Also, fun note, you know what happened when the last time they raised rates was? Anybody? 2006. What happened in 2007? Yeah, it's another reason why I'm in the deflation camp. But I think we're gonna hit a recession, and then after that recession, we're just gonna fly up into things are gonna get more expensive, and I don't know what's gonna happen there. But I think the best way to position yourself now is twofold. Prepare for a recession, right? Sell some of your stuff if you have to. Hold some cash. Cash is going to be the most important thing in a recession. Take your profits now, as they say, especially in real estate or something like that. Do your math to make sure that you and your family are safe, and that everything can work out. You're not the one being repoed from, right? Hold some cash and just be patient. Maybe make 5% on treasury bond or something like that. Not financial advice at all, but just what I'm going to do. Have some of your assets in place, because you don't know when it's going to hit, right? So you're making money as it goes, but make sure once it hits that those assets don't cost you. That's the biggest thing, because assets in a recession turn into liabilities. This is what I don't teach you in real estate school, right? This is when all those courses that you have that say, hey, real estate is the way to make millions and stuff like that. They don't tell you that in a recession, assets become liabilities. Yeah. And I can go through examples, but the one I talked about to where, hey, if that tenant squats on you and stays there for 4 months, right? Because the court system's backed up with all these evictions, and they just say, hey, yeah, I'll keep paying, I'll pay. And they get 3 months into it, and they can't afford $6,000 all at once because they're going paycheck to paycheck, and they lost their job, and they're just going to sit there and sweat it out. And now you have to wait for the court. You have to wait a month to get a hearing in the court, maybe a month and a half. And then once they deliberate you, the tenant goes in, they file not a plea, but something to give them an extra week or two, and then you have to go back to the court. You have to get your rate. You have to turn it into they turn to the police. The police get out there. They're supposed to be out there in a week, but they're so backed up it takes them 3 weeks to get out there. And before you know it, you're 6 months in. You haven't made a dime on this house. In fact, it's cost you $12,000 just on the mortgage alone, right? And then once they get out, you walk in the place and you're like, holy cow, this is $15,000, $20,000 in damage. So right there, it cost you almost $30,000 that you have to put back into that house to get it up and going. Oh, and by the way, you bought that house for $250,000, right? All in and everything. It's worth $200,000 now. Yeah, you're not going to sell it. You're going to have to put that money in there and get it going and stuff like that. What if you've got 3 houses like that? 4. How many of us have extra $100,000 in our back pocket right now? That's what I mean. Assets become liabilities in a down market, when a market turns down and it gets hard and ugly, and it's going to be bad, right? When there's blood in the streets, that's when you start buying and you get great discounts, right? When everyone's in euphoria, when everyone's like, real estate only goes up. I watched this 1 hour video or 1 hour TV show. I can flip a house too. Yeah. Anyway, but prepare for it. And then the last thing is, here's where I've got my stuff. I've got a lot of my assets in energy. A lot of you already know that if you follow me. In mineral rights, which are great because they have no liability. If the world burns down, they don't cost me an extra dollar, right? I just might not make as much, but they don't cost me any money, right? So they're an asset that can just sit there and I can just make money off of it, right? It doesn't have any downward trend, okay? And so that's where I'm at. Also, I didn't say this, but I had to make another video, is there's a huge thought that energy might be high as a recession pushes everything else down, right? Which is going to be really bad. But so I'm going to leave you with that. Definitely prepare for it. I've got my assets in line. I'm going to actually start holding money right now, holding cash. That's my next thing. Also, if you have any debts like credit cards, I'm going to start to pay those off. Get your credit right, because when the time comes, you want to hit that iron with a hammer really well. When as they say, strike when the iron's hot, because you don't want to miss out on that chance. So get your credit right, get some savings happening, get your assets in line, sell some of them if you have to. And again, in a recession, less is more. Let less assets with your tail in the wind, and more cash is better than having the opposite. Okay. Again, not financial advice. This is just my thoughts. And the last thing I want you to watch out for is this. How do you know when the recession is right around the corner, like in the next month or two? Watch the yield curve. Historically, I saw a guy do a video on this and was like, this is genius. When the yield curve is inverted, right? The higher interest rate for the less term loans, the higher interest rate for the shorter term loans, and the lower interest rate for the longer term loans. When that's inverted, right? When it straightens itself back out, that's when a recession hits. Like every time a recession has happened, the yield curve has been inverted, and then it straightens itself out, and then the recession hits. So watch out for that. If you're looking at a place for assets or anything like that, and you're interested in what I'm doing, shoot me an email, give me a call, something like that. We'll talk, we'll chat. If it's your thing, if it's a good fit, we'll see type thing. No pressure or anything like that. But in the end, I hope this has given you some things to think about and held you as some sort of value type thing to help your financial future. I'm going to leave you with that, and please leave some comments, a like. I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know if this helped you. And from me and the boys, hope you have a great day.